My name is Haley Whitman, 36, and last Sunday, I walked into my brother's wedding in full U.S. Army dress uniform and watched my mother's carefully curated house of lies collapse in front of 200 of the most powerful people in Washington, D.C. But to understand why I did what I did, you need to know the whole story, not just about the wedding, or the scandal, or the will. You need to know what it's like to grow up invisible in your own family, what it's like to be trained to disappear and then choose to rise. Anyway, before I take you into the hall, where it all came crashing down, do one thing for me. If you've ever been dismissed by someone who was supposed to protect you, a parent, a mentor, even a sibling, then hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me where you watched from. Because trust me, what's coming isn't just revenge, it's restoration. My childhood wasn't violent, it was precision neglect, choreographed by a woman who saw every moment of her daughter's life as a political liability. My mother, Eleanor Whitman, was a force. Picture Jackie O with the ruthlessness of Miranda Priestley. She threw charity galas with one hand while editing my every word with the other. I wasn't allowed to be loud. I wasn't allowed to cry. I wasn't allowed to beat my brother in board games, which I did, often, until I learned how to lose with a smile. Liam, my younger brother by 3 years, was her prize creation, blonde, charming, a straight-A student with a minor in effortless charm. From the moment he was born, he was the future of the Whitman name, and I was told I had potential, if I could just stop walking like a linebacker. My father, Colonel Marcus Whitman, tried to offset the imbalance. He taught me how to hold a compass before I could spell longitude. When I told him I wanted to apply to West Point, he didn't blink, just handed me his old ROTC wristwatch and said, "If you're going to wear this name, wear it loud." But when he died suddenly, from a heart attack during a veterans fundraiser, the last tether between me and this family snapped. His funeral was held at Arlington, a full honor burial. I stood at attention in uniform as they folded his flag. My mother didn't speak to me the entire time, not a single word. The months after the funeral were a blur of paperwork and press releases. Eleanor moved fast. She announced the relaunch of the Marcus Whitman Civic Leadership Fund, my father's lifelong project, now to be led by Liam. My name, absent from every press statement, not even listed under surviving family. That would have been enough to break me once. But war changes you. I'd survived Kandahar. I'd learned how to build fire out of wreckage. Then came the letter from the family estate attorney and the video file my father had recorded the year before his death. It wasn't long, just 2 minutes, but I've replayed it more times than I can count. Haley, if you're seeing this, your mother's already started rewriting the story. I need you to know that everything I built was always meant for you. The house, the scholarship fund, the legacy. Don't let her sell it off like a campaign poster. Take it back. Take your name back. In that moment, something inside me clicked. It wasn't grief. It wasn't even rage. It was precision, the same precision I'd been taught to use in field operations, now redirected toward a domestic battlefield. You see, my mother had one weakness image. She lived for it, and she never imagined I'd dare to show up and ruin hers. But I wasn't going to just show up. I was going to walk into her curated fantasy, her perfectly staged wedding of the year, and detonate the truth in front of everyone who ever mattered to her. Only, I wasn't going in alone. The key turned out to be Ava Russo, Liam's fiancée. We weren't friends, not really, but 3 years earlier, in a roadside IED blast outside Kandahar, I dragged her out of an overturned Humvee with a dislocated shoulder and a piece of shrapnel in her thigh. I didn't know it then, but that moment created a bond she never forgot. Ava reached out to me quietly after my father's funeral. She said she was concerned about some things, that Eleanor had started conditioning Liam to cut ties with anyone who might taint the narrative, her exact words. Then, a week before the wedding, Ava texted me, "I have something." She threatened me, and I recorded it. That recording would become the first bullet in my arsenal. The final one was buried in a box in my father's closet, a sealed envelope containing the original will, leaving all property, including the house and the scholarship fund, in my name. All I needed now was the right moment to strike. There's something profoundly absurd about walking into a ballroom lined with $300 centerpieces, knowing you're about to destroy the lives of most people in it. The air smelled of expensive floral arrangements and curated legacy. Every wine glass sparkled. Every linen was starched to military precision. And every guest looked like they had just stepped out of a Forbes profile. And there I was, standing at the entrance of the Grand Hall of the Georgetown Historic Armory, in full military dress blues, the silver star glinting on my chest like a provocation. I could feel their stares before I even took 3 steps inside. It wasn't just that I was uninvited. It was that I existed. In that room, my presence was a rupture, a data error in their storybook simulation. Because in their minds, Eleanor Whitman only had one child, and that child was already on the stage, standing next to Ava, smiling like he hadn't just inherited a legacy built on betrayal. I spotted Eleanor across the room. She was laughing with a senator's wife, her hands moving like a practiced ballerina's, delicately adjusting the strap of her pearl clutch. When she saw me, her face didn't twitch. She didn't gasp. That would have been too human. She just paused for half a second, like her system had to reboot. Then, with a smile as sharp as a scalpel, she floated over. "Haley," she said, her voice smooth but loaded. "This is neither the time nor the place." "And yet," I replied evenly, "you scheduled the whole thing in a building built to honor men like Dad, and forgot to invite the only person he trusted with his name." Her eyes flicked to my medals, then back to my face. "We both know you love making a scene. Let's not disappoint your audience." It would have been easy to snap, to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled like a woman who had already won and was just waiting for the final move. "Don't worry, Mother," I said. "The show hasn't started yet." I slipped into the second row of seats, directly behind the press section. A quiet hum of whispers began to ripple through the room. I could hear a producer from DC Network murmuring to her assistant, "That's her. The general. The daughter." They hadn't expected me, but now they couldn't look away. The ceremony dragged on. Vows, toasts, a video montage of Liam as a child, conveniently cropped to exclude any trace of me. It was surgical. Years of photographs, perfectly framed to erase me. Even the one photo where I clearly stood at my father's retirement ceremony cropped at the shoulder, so it looked like Eleanor had her hand resting on air. Ava stood beside Liam, smiling, playing her role to perfection. But her eyes kept scanning the room. At exactly 7:38 p.m., just as the best man lifted his glass for the final toast, she moved. "I'd like to say something," Ava said, stepping forward. There was an awkward pause. The best man hesitated. Liam blinked, clearly not expecting a script deviation. Eleanor's eyes narrowed like a sniper aligning her scope. But Ava didn't wait. She reached into her bouquet and pulled out a small USB drive. "Before I become a Whitman by name, I think it's important I understand what that name actually means." Murmurs, stirring, a low buzz of confusion and anticipation. Ava turned to the tech booth. "Play the file." The video played on the main projection screen behind them. At first, static, then, Eleanor's voice cold, crisp, unmistakable. "She cannot be part of this family. If she shows up, you disown her. If you hesitate, I will cancel this wedding. Liam." and I will end her career if she ever contacts you again." Gasps. Actual gasps. The room fractured in real time. Senators' wives turned to each other in horror. Reporters lifted their phones. Eleanor remained frozen, a statue in pearls. Liam looked like someone had slapped the soul out of him. Ava, for her part, stood calm, like a soldier who knew the enemy's artillery was already spent. I rose slowly. No theatrics, just quiet. Controlled power. I walked toward the stage, each step echoing through the stunned silence. When I reached the front, I pulled the final card. "I have a message too," I said, pulling out the USB drive I'd brought with me. "From Colonel Marcus Whitman. He recorded it for me. For this exact moment." The screen went dark, then lit again, this time with my father's face. Weathered, strong. A man who had given his life to something larger than himself. "If you're seeing this," his voice began, "then the Whitman legacy is under attack. Haley, you were never the daughter they wanted, but you are the one I trusted, the one who earned the name. I leave the house, the fund, and the story to you. And to those watching, remember, blood doesn't define legacy. Character does." Silence. Then a wave of voices. Shock. Outrage. Vindication. The room came alive, but I heard none of it. All I saw was Eleanor. Her eyes still unreadable, but now just slightly cracked. For the first time in my life, I saw her grip tighten, her chin twitch, her mask fracture. A senator stood. "Eleanor," he said, "is this true?" She opened her mouth, closed it. No prepared speech, no press kit, just silence. But Liam did something none of us saw coming. He stepped forward and took the mic. His voice was quiet, but steady. "I've spent my whole life chasing an image. A version of success built on silence, on omission. I didn't know what it cost until now. Haley." He turned to me, eyes soft but aching. "I'm sorry. I let her turn me into something I didn't choose." He pulled the Whitman medallion from his chest pocket, the ceremonial family crest, and placed it in my palm. "I think this belongs to you." The crowd stirred again. But this time it wasn't scandal. It was recognition, the kind that doesn't come from titles, but from truth. And I knew then this wasn't just a victory. It was a reclamation, not just of property or name, but of visibility, of voice. But even as I stepped down from that stage, even as people approached me with handshakes and apologies and wide-eyed awe, I knew this wasn't over. Because someone like Eleanor Whitman doesn't crumble quietly. She recalibrates, she reloads, and if I'd just stolen her crown jewel moment, the wedding, the press, the legacy she would not walk away without swinging. That was the night I won the war of names. But another war was brewing. One she would fight in shadows, with influence, leverage, and rumors. And I had to decide, do I walk away victorious, or stay in the ring until the Whitman name meant only what I defined? Because taking back your legacy is one thing. Holding on to it, that's a whole different battlefield. You'd think after a night like that, after exposing my mother's manipulation in front of half the Capitol's elite, reclaiming my father's legacy, and watching my brother hand me the medallion she once swore would never be mine, that I would finally get a moment to breathe. But people like Eleanor Whitman don't disappear in the face of truth. They simply change tactics. And I knew the silence that followed wasn't surrender. It was recalibration. It started small. A whisper campaign. Subtle comments planted in places where power flows: military advisory boards, veterans advocacy circles, foundation boards. I was too emotional for leadership. I used family drama to advance my image. I was a disgrace to the uniform for airing private matters publicly. These weren't official statements. Of course. Just background noise in the right ears, designed to cast shadows. And for a while, it worked. Invitations slowed. A key speaking engagement at the Department of Defense's Women in Leadership Summit was postponed indefinitely. A journalist who had praised me 2 weeks earlier suddenly published a piece questioning the militarization of family trauma. But it wasn't just professional erosion. It was psychological warfare. One morning I woke up to find the front door of my father's home. My home now covered in flyers accusing me of forging the will. Another time, a college friend I hadn't spoken to in years reached out to say she'd been contacted by a concerned third party, warning her about ongoing investigations into my ethics. None of it could be directly traced back to Eleanor. She was too careful. She knew how to weaponize influence without leaving fingerprints, but I could feel her everywhere, like a virus in the walls. The final straw came when I received a formal notice a legal petition had been filed to freeze the Marcus Whitman Fund pending further inquiry into fiduciary misconduct. The signature on the complaint: an anonymous whistleblower. But I knew who had written it. The phrasing was too familiar, the language too strategic. I could practically hear her voice in every sentence. I sat at my kitchen table that night with the original will, the notarized documents, and my father's video message spread out in front of me. My fingers trembled not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that this wasn't about inheritance anymore. This was about erasure. She was trying to make me doubt whether I ever belonged in the first place. That's when I called Dr. Maya Singh. She wasn't just a retired intelligence advisor. She was the woman who used to coach psychological resilience for deep cover agents. She'd seen minds dismantled and rebuilt from scratch. And she owed my father a debt from an old operation in Iraq. "Eleanor's not fighting you, Haley," she said after I laid it all out. "She's fighting her own reflection. But she can't reach her past, so she's reaching for you. You're the proof that her story isn't perfect." We sat for hours, mapping out Eleanor's behavioral patterns. Every move, every target, every person she'd tried to convert into a pawn. And when I told Maya about the fund being frozen, she narrowed her eyes. "She's not trying to win the public. She's trying to bankrupt your capacity to fight." Maya leaned forward, her voice dropping low. "Then let's show her what happens when a daughter turns into an adversary trained by war." That night marked a shift. I stopped reacting and started planning. First, I called General Vance, my father's closest military friend, and a man whose Rolodex still scared Pentagon officials. He agreed to write a formal affidavit confirming the authenticity of the will and my father's verbal intentions, which we submitted to the court handling the foundation dispute. Then I assembled a team, not lawyers, but survivors. I contacted Sarah Jensen, one of the scholarship recipients my father had mentored, now a rising civil rights attorney. I asked her to co-lead the fund's restructuring into a public benefit trust, designed to prevent any one party, including me, from using it for personal leverage. Transparency, accountability, and bulletproof bylaws. We even renamed it the Marcus and Haley Whitman Leadership Initiative, a move that sent a quiet but lethal message to my mother. I wasn't just reclaiming the legacy, I was multiplying it. But the most strategic strike came from Ava. Quietly, methodically. She leaked parts of the original recording to select reporters, not tabloids, but seasoned political journalists who knew the power of a slow-burn investigation. Within 2 weeks, the narrative began to shift. A long-form piece titled "Pearls and Poison." The social engineering of Eleanor Whitman hit the stands. It chronicled decades of Eleanor's manipulation, not just of me, but of donors, colleagues, even Liam. Several former staffers from her civic boards anonymously corroborated details about intimidation, coercion, and backdoor favors. It didn't spark an explosion. It sparked a rot. Invitations dried up. Donors quietly distanced themselves. The charity gala she was planning was canceled due to insufficient RSVPs. Her perfectly constructed world began to implode not from a single punch, but from thousands of paper cuts, all exposed under a microscope she couldn't control. Still, I hadn't seen her, not since the wedding. That silence hung like fog, thick with anticipation and something else, unfinishedness. I thought maybe she'd try to reach out, offer some veiled apology, or one last power play. But nothing came. Until the envelope arrived. It wasn't handwritten, just a plain white card with the Whitman seal embossed on the flap. No note inside, just a clipping, an obituary. My grandfather Eleanor's father had died quietly at 94. Below the notice, a single post-it. The name is yours now. Do with it what you will. No signature. But I knew. I stared at that card for a long time. The woman who had tried to erase me had finally accepted the end of her reign. Not in words, not in court, but in silence. And it felt heavier than any confrontation could have, because now it was truly mine. The name, the stories, the future. And yet, I couldn't help but wonder if she had truly stepped away, or if this was just another form of control. Letting go without letting me forget who had held the reins for so long. Because even victory, when born from pain, can carry the scent of mourning. And I had to decide, would I carry the Whitman name forward out of spite or purpose? Was I still fighting her, or finally writing something of my own? Those were the questions I carried as I stepped onto the podium for the official relaunch of the Leadership Initiative. But as I adjusted the mic and saw Sarah, Ava, and even Liam standing at the back, quiet but present, I realized the answer might be both. The crowd waited, and I opened with the only words that felt true. This isn't about legacy anymore. It's about direction. And I plan to make sure the next Whitman story is one worth telling. But the room didn't know yet the final chapter wasn't over. Because just as I stepped down from that podium, a call came through. From a blocked number. And the voice on the other end wasn't my mother. It was someone who claimed they had a copy of a letter. One written by my father. One that had never been seen. And the truth in that letter, they said, would change everything, again. At first, I thought it was a bluff. A final desperate attempt to reignite a story that had already run its course. The voice on the other end of the call was male, measured, anonymous. He never gave his name, only said he worked in estate logistics, and that during a recent audit of a private storage unit leased in my father's name, they had found a sealed envelope labeled "For Haley, only if she asks." He didn't explain how or why it hadn't surfaced earlier. He didn't offer to send it directly, just a location, a box number, and a key code. Then he hung up. I should have told someone, Ava, Maya, even Liam, but something about the way the voice spoke quiet, precise, like someone trained to disappear made me hesitate. This wasn't a trap. It was something else. Something personal. That night, I drove 3 hours south to a storage facility tucked into a stretch of flat road near Quantico. The kind of place no one paid attention to. Not flashy, not visible from the highway. No cameras, no attendants. Just keypad gates and long metal corridors echoing silence. Inside Unit B-117, I found a fireproof box wedged behind old military duffels and faded plaques. I opened it slowly, heart pounding. Inside, wrapped in parchment and bound with my father's bootlace, was a letter. 1 page. Handwritten, no date. Just the familiar, angular script of a man who never wasted words. Haley, if you're reading this, then it means you didn't just survive Eleanor. You outmaneuvered her. I won't lie and say I expected that. I knew you were capable. But I also knew what she could do to you, what she did to me. You may think your fight started with her, but it didn't. It started with me. Because I let her build that cage around you, and I was too much a coward to break it. I froze. My father, a man of unshakable decorum, of metals and iron principles, calling himself a coward. The words blurred. I married Eleanor because she came from power, because I was tired of being told I wasn't enough without the right name. I thought I could build something with her, and when you came along, I swore I'd make it different, but I didn't. I let her clip your wings early, let her soften you to fit her idea of perfect, and every time I told myself I was protecting you, I was really protecting myself from her. The truth is, she didn't erase you. I did. One moment at a time. I read that line 3 times. Then again, and again. Because if there's one thing a daughter never expects to hear from her father, it's that the silence she blamed on someone else had once been his choice, too. But there's something else. Something I never said out loud. You saved me. Haley, you saved me from myself, watching you become everything they said you couldn't be. It reminded me that blood doesn't make you brave. Choice does. And you chose to keep showing up, even when the room was designed to make you vanish. You made the Whitman name mean something new. There was no grand reveal, no instructions, just a signature. And one final line. If you choose to forgive me, don't do it out of pity. Do it because you've already done something I never could. You faced Eleanor and didn't flinch. I sat on the floor of that cold storage unit for what felt like hours. The air smelled of dust and rusted memories. And for the first time since the wedding, I cried, not because of guilt or pain, but because I realized that my father hadn't just left me his medals or his mission. He'd left me the truth, and it was messy, imperfect, human. When I returned to D.C., I didn't tell anyone about the letter, not yet. But something in me shifted. I no longer felt like I was carrying my father's legacy. I was building from it, and to build forward. I needed to know the entire map of the battlefield. I scheduled a meeting with Liam, just the 2 of us. No media, no public displays, just siblings with the same bloodline, finally untethered from a script neither of us wrote. He looked tired when he arrived, not physically, but spiritually, like someone still trying to understand where his loyalty should have gone. We sat across from each other in a small cafe near Foggy Bottom, the kind of place where political staffers whispered sins over cappuccinos. You look different, he said after a pause, like you finally stopped trying to win. I sipped my coffee. Maybe I realized some fights only matter if you know why you started them. He looked down. Then, after a long silence, he pulled something from his coat, a folded document, the petition to dissolve the trust, my trust. I want to help fix what she broke, he said quietly, not just in public, between us. I didn't say yes, not yet, but I didn't walk away, either, because maybe just maybe 2 children raised by a woman who taught them silence could finally teach each other how to speak. The next morning, Eleanor issued a formal statement through her lawyer. No apology, no direct admission, just a deflection. Polished as ever, I believe families should handle their matters privately. I support my children's independence and will be stepping away from public affairs to focus on personal wellness. Translation: she was backing off, but not out of guilt, out of self-preservation. Because in her world, shame was the only contagion she couldn't vaccinate against. And yet, I couldn't help but wonder what was left of her now. With no spotlight, no social club throne, no control. What becomes of a woman whose entire identity was built on being watched? That question lingered as I stood backstage at the Department of Defense Summit 3 weeks later. I had been re-invited unanimously. This time, not as a cautionary tale, but as keynote speaker. The room held over 400 women in uniform, many of whom had messaged me after the articles went public. They didn't want revenge stories. They wanted roadmaps, proof that surviving the invisible battles, the ones inside your own family, mattered as much as the ones fought on foreign soil. I took the stage. No script, just truth. I used to think being a Whitman meant honoring a history I never asked to inherit. But what I've learned is this legacy isn't about what you're given. It's about what you choose to keep and what you decide to let die. My father built a name. My mother tried to preserve an image. I chose to make something real. The room stood, not because of me, but because every woman in that room had faced a moment where she had to choose survival or silence. But even as the applause echoed, my phone buzzed. Another message, unknown number, one sentence. There's one more letter, and this one isn't about you. I stared at the screen, pulse climbing, because if this letter wasn't about me, and it wasn't from Eleanor, then the story I thought was finally closed was about to be rewritten again. I didn't move at first, just stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply button, as if the wrong word might detonate something I hadn't prepared for. There's one more letter, and this one isn't about you. The message was unsigned, same blocked number, but this time, it came with a location and address in Alexandria, Virginia. No code, no box number, just a place, a house, and a time Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Come alone. I could have ignored it, should have. Maybe. I had already closed the book. Hadn't I exposed my mother, reclaimed the legacy, heard the voice of my father from beyond the grave? I was supposed to feel at peace, but I didn't. Because if this letter wasn't about me, and someone had gone to such lengths to bury it, then it meant something. Maybe not for me personally, but for the story I'd spent my life untangling. So that Saturday, I drove again, this time without hesitation, without backup. The house was old, colonial style, draped in ivy and shadow. A woman answered the door, early 50s. Sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She didn't introduce herself, just stepped aside and nodded toward a small study off the hallway. There, on a mahogany desk, lay another envelope, yellowed, sealed in wax. I recognized the handwriting instantly. My father's, the same familiar slant. But this one was addressed to E. Whitmore, private. I looked at the woman. You're Eleanor's sister, I guessed. It wasn't hard to see. The same bone structure, but less sculpted, more tired. She nodded. She used to be Eleanor Whitmore, before she was a Whitman. I blinked. I didn't even know she had a sister. She made sure of that. The woman replied. Her voice was low but firm, like someone who had waited a long time to be heard. She severed every connection that reminded her who she was before, including me. But your father, he kept in touch, quietly. That letter, she explained, had arrived 2 months after their wedding. She was instructed never to send it unless one of two things happened. Either Eleanor died, or she lost the name she clung to so desperately. I saw your speech, the woman said, and when I saw her name vanish from the foundation's board last week, I figured it was time. She handed it to me. You deserve to know what was written for her. You deserve to see the truth your father tried to give, even if too late. I opened it slowly, heart pounding again, slower this time. This wasn't closure. This was excavation. Eleanor, if you're reading this, then something has shifted. Maybe you chose to change. Maybe you were forced to. Either way, I need to say something I never had the courage to say in person. You are brilliant and terrifying, and when I met you, I mistook that for strength. I thought I needed your world, your connections, your rules, your clarity. And maybe I did. But what I didn't understand until too late was that your vision of perfection came at a cost. And that cost was her. Haley was never going to fit in your mold. And I realize now, you never wanted her to. You didn't want a daughter. You wanted a mirror. And when she refused to reflect you, you erased her. I let it happen. That's my failure. But I'm writing now to tell you this. If you still have even a sliver of the woman I once believed in, then stop. Stop trying to control her. Stop shaping the world around you into something digestible. And most of all, stop pretending that legacy is about appearances. It's not. It's about what survives you when your name is forgotten. And one day, Eleanor, it will be, if you ever loved me not as a tool, but as a man, then let Haley live without your edits. Let her name grow beyond ours. There was no flourish at the end, no poetic sign-off, just the initials, M.W. I folded the letter and sat in silence, not from shock by now. Nothing surprised me but from the realization that somewhere deep beneath the sculpted cruelty my mother wielded like a blade, there might once have been a person capable of understanding this, of hearing it, of letting it in. But she never did. The letter had never been opened. That wax seal had remained unbroken for more than 3 decades. My mother had never asked, never wondered, never wanted to read the words meant for her. And that, more than anything, told me what I needed to know. She hadn't just erased me. She'd erased herself, too. When I left that house, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, like a soldier coming home after a war that had outlived its purpose. There were no more battles to win, no more secrets to uncover, just pieces to rebuild, and people to choose. I started small, a dinner with Liam, regular calls with Ava, who now ran a mentorship program for women veterans. I brought Maya on as an advisor to the foundation, not because I needed protection, but because she understood the cost of silence. And slowly, brick by brick, we began to lay something new. We changed the mission of the foundation, no longer just a scholarship fund. It became a training ground for young women in public service, military, law, government. We named it the Vanguard Initiative, shedding the family name altogether, not to bury it, but to let it rest. 1 year later, I was asked to speak at West Point's commencement ceremony, this time, not just as a general, but as an alumna, a woman, a daughter of a name that nearly destroyed her and somehow made her stronger. As I stood at the podium, wind cutting through the green expanse behind me, I said the only thing that mattered. We are not the names we inherit. We are the choices we make with them. Applause followed, but even louder. In my heart was the silence that used to haunt me, now replaced by something cleaner, calmer, like breath returning to lungs that had been holding too long. I never saw my mother again, not in person, not by letter, but sometimes. When I walk past a mirror and see my own eyes staring back, steeled, precise, but softer than hers, I wonder if she ever regretted what she became, if she ever looked at the name Whitman and realized it meant more without her in it. And maybe that's the real victory. Not the headlines, not the accolades, but the quiet reclaiming of something sacred, the right to define yourself when others tried to define you first. Because in the end, legacies don't die from scandal. They die from silence. And I refuse to be quiet ever again. My story isn't just about a family, a mother, and a daughter. It's a journey of finding myself in a world filled with schemes, betrayals, and silent voices. I've learned that honor isn't a gift handed down by others. It's a flame you carry inside, no matter how fierce the storms. Some days, what we truly need isn't forgiveness, but acceptance. And the greatest acceptance is being true to yourself, even when someone tries to erase you. I have stepped out of the shadow my mother cast, and now, I am not just someone bearing the Whitman name, I am the one who has rebuilt it, turning it into my own story. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, if you've been underestimated or dismissed, know this: you are not alone. Strength doesn't always come from the victories seen by the world. It comes from the battles you quietly fight every single day. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please leave a comment, share your own story, or simply hit subscribe so we can share these untold journeys together. And if you find yourself in your own battlefield, remember sometimes, the only person you need to conquer is yourself.